Imagine dying as a hunted child on the frozen steppes of Mongolia, abandoned by your own tribe, watching your mother dig for roots to keep you alive, knowing that any passing warrior could kill you for sport because you have no clan to avenge you. Now imagine that same child, 30 years later, standing over the ruins of the most powerful empire in Central Asia, watching a city of 1 million people burn because they killed his messengers. Imagine him controlling more land than the Roman Empire ever touched, commanding armies that move faster than any force in history, and rewriting the rules of war so completely that his tactics are still studied today. This is Genghis Khan. And if you think you know this story, Mongol barbarian conquers Asia, kills millions, that's it. You're missing the most important parts. Because this isn't just a story about conquest. It's about a man who survived absolute zero and rebuilt himself into an unstoppable force. It's about how someone with nothing, no tribe, no army, no inherited power, created the largest contiguous empire in human history through pure strategic genius, psychological warfare, and a willingness to burn entire civilizations to enforce one simple rule: loyalty matters more than blood. Before Genghis Khan, the Mongols were scattered tribes fighting each other over horses and grazing land, irrelevant to the great empires of China, Persia, and the Islamic world. After Genghis Khan, those empires were either destroyed or bowing to Mongol overlords. The Silk Road, which had been a dangerous patchwork of bandits and local tyrants, became the safest trade route in the world under Mongol protection. Genetic studies suggest 1 in 200 men alive today carries his bloodline. His empire at its height controlled 9% of all land on Earth, and approximately 40 million people died in the conquests he started. If you're here because you want to understand how power actually works, how one person can take a system that seems fixed and shatter it completely, how tactics and psychology matter more than numbers, how empires are built not just through violence, but through revolutionizing the structure of loyalty and organization, you're in exactly the right place. And if this kind of deep dive into history's most transformative figures is what you're looking for, subscribing helps me keep making them. This is the story of how Temujin, a boy left to die on the Mongolian steppe, became Genghis Khan and unleashed a storm that changed the world forever. The year is around 1162, and Temujin is born into a world where your tribe is everything: your protection, your identity, your survival. Without a tribe, you're already dead. You just don't know it yet. His father, Yesugei, is a minor chieftain of the Borjigin clan, respected but not powerful, living in the brutal hierarchy of Mongolian tribal politics, where alliances shift constantly, and today's friend is tomorrow's enemy. When Temujin is 9 years old, his father takes him to another tribe to arrange a marriage alliance, standard practice for building political connections. They find a suitable family, and Yesugei leaves young Temujin there to get to know his future wife, Berthe, and her family. On the journey home, Yesugei stops at a Tatar camp. The Tatars are old enemies, and they recognize him. They poison his food. By the time he makes it back to his own camp, he's dying, and there's nothing anyone can do about it. This is where Temujin's story should end. His father is dead, and in Mongolian tribal culture, a chieftain's family has status only through him. Yesugei's followers don't owe loyalty to a widow and her children. They owe loyalty to strength and protection, and a 9-year-old boy offers neither. So they make a calculation. Why share scarce resources with a family that can't contribute? Why risk antagonizing enemies who might come looking for Yasuge's sons? The tribe abandons them, not dramatically, not with speeches or ceremony. They just leave. One day Temujin's mother, Hoilun, wakes up and the camp is gone. Tents, horses, livestock, people, everything vanished during the night, leaving her with multiple young children on the steppe, with winter approaching and no way to survive. It's a death sentence with extra steps. But Hoilun doesn't accept death. She gathers her children, Temujin and his 3 brothers, and 1 sister, and she teaches them to survive. They dig wild roots and tubers. They fish in rivers. They hunt marmots and small game. They live like animals for months, maybe years, moving constantly to avoid other tribes who might kill them or enslave them. Temujin grows up not as a chieftain's son, but as something closer to a wolf cub. Hungry, watching, learning that the world respects only strength and that mercy is a luxury nobody can afford. When Temujin is around 13, tensions within his own fragmented family explode. His half-brother Bektar has been bullying Temujin and his younger brother Kasar, stealing their food, asserting dominance. In most families, siblings fight and eventually reconcile. In a family that's starving and knows that weakness means death, sibling rivalry becomes existential. Temujin and Kasar hunt Bektar down and kill him with arrows, shooting their own half-brother like he's prey. Their mother is horrified, calling them destroyers of their own family. But Temujin has learned a lesson he'll never forget. Eliminate threats before they eliminate you. Hesitation is fatal. As Temujin reaches his teens, he becomes a target for the Taichiud clan, people who used to be allied with his father, but now see him as a potential future threat. If Yasuge's son grows up strong and charismatic, he might seek revenge for their abandonment, might gather followers, might become dangerous. So they raid his camp and capture him, putting him in a wooden collar called a kangwe, a prisoner meant to be humiliated and eventually killed. But Temujin escapes during a tribal celebration when his guards are drunk. He runs into the night with the kangwe still on his neck, hides in a river, and is eventually helped by a family who risks their lives to hide him and remove the collar. He disappears back into the steppe, now absolutely certain that he owes his survival to his own cunning and to the few people who chose to help him, not to bloodlines or traditional clan obligations. By his late teens, Temujin has survived things that should have killed him multiple times. He has no inherited power, no army, no wealth. But he has something more dangerous. Absolute clarity about how the world actually works, unclouded by noble fantasies about honor and tradition. He understands that loyalty is a choice, not an obligation. That fear is a tool. That the old tribal system, where blood and birth determine everything, is a weakness waiting to be exploited. And most importantly, that if you're ruthless enough and smart enough, you can rebuild from nothing. He's ready to start building, and the world isn't ready for what he's about to become. Temujin's path from outcast to leader starts with a single alliance, and the way he builds it tells you everything about how he thinks. He goes back to Berta's family, the girl his father had arranged for him to marry years earlier. And he makes his case. He has nothing to offer except himself, his brothers, and a promise of future greatness that has no basis in current reality. But Berta's father sees something in him. Maybe desperation, maybe potential, maybe just a calculated bet that this young man is too stubborn to stay powerless. The marriage happens, and it comes with a dowry that includes a valuable black sable fur coat. Temujin takes that coat and makes one of the most strategic decisions of his life. He gives it to Togrul, also called Onkan, leader of the powerful Kere tribe, who had been his father's blood brother. The gift is a petition. I need your protection. I need your legitimacy. I need your forces if I'm going to survive. Togrul accepts, impressed by the gesture, and remembering old obligations to Yesuge. Suddenly, Temujin has a patron, and that changes everything. He's no longer a nobody. He's someone the Kerate leader has endorsed. But the test comes immediately. Merkit raiders attack Temujin's camp in retaliation for an old grievance. Years earlier, Yesuge had stolen Holun from a Merkit warrior, and now they want revenge. They can't find Temujin, so they take Berta instead, kidnapping her and disappearing into the steppe. For Temujin, this is more than a personal violation. In tribal culture, failing to defend your wife, allowing her to be taken, marks you as weak. If he doesn't respond with overwhelming force, he'll never be taken seriously. He calls on Togrul for help and also reaches out to Jamuka, his childhood friend. Jamuka is everything Temujin isn't. Charismatic, well-connected, already a respected leader with his own following. Years earlier, they'd sworn blood brotherhood, becoming Ande, bound by oaths stronger than family ties. Now Temujin needs that bond to mean something real. The three-way alliance, Temujin, Togrul, and Jamuka, assembles a force and attacks the Merkits. The raid is successful. Berta is rescued after months in captivity, and she's pregnant. The child she gives birth to, Yochi, will always carry questions about his paternity, and those questions will haunt Mongol succession for decades. But Temujin accepts him as his son, and the message is clear. Temujin protects what's his, and he destroys anyone who challenges him. The successful raid does something unexpected. It gives Temujin a reputation. Warriors start noticing him. He begins attracting followers, not because of his bloodline, but because he's competent and loyal to the people who fight for him. He shares plunder fairly. He rewards merit. He remembers who helped him when he had nothing, and he elevates those people regardless of their origins. This is revolutionary in a society where aristocratic bloodlines determine your ceiling. For several years, Temujin and Jamuka operate as allies, their camps even joining together at times. But cracks appear because they represent fundamentally different philosophies. Jamuka is a traditionalist. He believes in the old tribal hierarchies, in aristocratic privilege, in the system as it exists. Temujin is a revolutionary, though he'd never use that word. He believes in loyalty and competence over bloodline. He elevates commoners who prove themselves. He's building a new kind of organization where the only thing that matters is whether you're useful and whether you're loyal. The breaking point comes gradually. Followers start choosing between them. Some of Jamuka's own people defect to Temujin because they prefer his style of leadership. Jealousy builds. Old friendships curdle into rivalry. In 1201, Mongol tribes convene a Kurultai, a great gathering, and they choose sides. Jamuka is declared Gorkhan, universal ruler, by a coalition of traditional aristocrats who see Temujin as a threat to the old order. It's a direct challenge. The two former blood brothers are now on a collision course towards civil war, and only one of them can survive. Because Temujin has learned the lesson that will define his entire career. You cannot reform a system while leaving your enemies alive inside it. You either destroy them completely, or they destroy you later. Half measures guarantee defeat. The war between Temujin and Jamukha isn't just about personal rivalry. It's about whether the future of the Mongol tribes will be based on birth or merit, on tradition or innovation, on the old world or a new one. Temujin is building in real time. And Temujin is about to prove that his system doesn't just sound good in theory. It wins battles. By 1201, the Mongolian steppe is fracturing into two camps: traditional tribal leaders rallying around Jamukha and the old aristocratic system, and a growing coalition of misfits, commoners, and pragmatists gathering around Temujin, who represents something new and dangerous. The conflict that follows isn't just warfare. It's a war over the future structure of society itself. Temujin faces serious military disadvantages. His forces are outnumbered. Many powerful clans side with Jamukha because they fear what Temujin represents. If bloodlines don't matter, if commoners can rise to command, if loyalty replaces hereditary privilege, then what happens to their inherited status? The aristocrats unite against him because they understand instinctively that Temujin winning means their world ending. The battles are brutal and close. At the Battle of Dalan Baljut around 1201, Jamukha's coalition actually defeats Temujin's forces. Temujin retreats, and it looks like the old order will prevail. But then Jamukha makes a catastrophic mistake that reveals everything wrong with the traditional system. After his victory, he has 70 prisoners from Temujin's army boiled alive in massive cauldrons as a display of power and cruelty. It's meant to terrify people into submission. Instead, it backfires. Warriors watching this, even warriors on Jamukha's own side, are horrified. This isn't honorable victory. This is sadistic aristocratic privilege displayed through torture. Defections accelerate. People who were considering joining Jamukha's coalition change their minds. People already in his coalition start quietly shifting loyalty to Temujin, who gains a reputation for being ruthless but fair. He kills enemies, but he doesn't torture them for entertainment. He treats defeated warriors with respect if they surrender, often incorporating them into his own forces. Over the next several years, Temujin systematically defeats rival tribes one by one. The Tatars, the ones who poisoned his father, are conquered with particular brutality. Temujin orders that every Tatar male taller than the height of a cart axle should be killed, eliminating an entire generation and ensuring they can never threaten him again. It's genocide by any modern definition, but from Temujin's perspective, it's insurance. You don't leave enemies alive to regroup. But here's what makes Temujin different from typical conquerors. After he defeats tribes, he doesn't just subjugate them. He dismantles the old tribal structure completely and rebuilds something new. He breaks up existing clans and redistributes people into new military units based on decimal organization. Tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s. These units have no tribal identity. They're loyal to their commanders and ultimately to Temujin. Not to ancient clan affiliations. He promotes based on merit, not birth. A shepherd who proves himself in battle can rise to command thousands. An aristocrat who fails gets demoted or killed. The message is crystal clear. The only thing that matters in Temujin's army is competence and loyalty. Nothing else protects you. Nothing else elevates you. He codifies this with what becomes known as the Yesa, a legal code that establishes rules everyone must follow, from the Khan himself to the lowest soldier. Theft is punishable by death. Adultery is punishable by death. Desertion is punishable by death. But also, soldiers who save a comrade's life are rewarded. Commanders who look out for their men are promoted. Captured enemies who fought bravely are offered positions in the Mongol army if they swear loyalty. The code is brutal, but it's applied equally, which, in a tribal society where aristocrats operated above the law, is revolutionary. The practical result is that Temujin assembles an army unlike anything the steppe has ever seen. It's disciplined, organized, meritocratic, and absolutely loyal, because everyone in it knows their success depends on the system working, not on maintaining traditional privileges. Warriors fight harder because they know they can rise. Commanders plan better because failure means replacement. The entire force operates with a unity of purpose that tribal armies, constantly fracturing along clan lines, simply cannot match. In 1206, after decades of warfare, Temujin has unified the Mongol tribes under his leadership. A Kurultai is convened, a gathering of all the tribal leaders and commanders. They acknowledge reality. He has won. The old system is dead, and they proclaim him Genghis Khan, roughly translating to universal ruler, or Oceanic Khan, the leader whose authority extends as far as the ocean, which means everywhere. He's about 44 years old, and he's transformed from a hunted child into the undisputed ruler of the Mongolian steppe. He controls perhaps 1 million people and can field armies of 100,000 or more mounted warriors who move faster, fight harder, and coordinate better than any force in Central Asia. He's unified tribes that had been fighting each other for centuries. He's created a meritocratic military system in a world dominated by hereditary privilege. And now he's going to look outward at the great sedentary civilizations, China, Persia, the Islamic world, that have always dismissed the steppe nomads as primitive barbarians. He's going to teach them that the barbarians have evolved, and they're coming. By 1219, Genghis Khan has already conquered the Jin dynasty in northern China and established himself as a force powerful enough that the great empires of Asia should take him seriously. He's not interested purely in conquest for its own sake. He wants trade, tribute, and respect. He sends a trade caravan of around 500 merchants to the Khwarezmian Empire, which controls Central Asia and parts of modern-day Iran, Uzbekistan, and Afghanistan. It's one of the wealthiest empires in the world, led by Shah Ala ad-Din Muhammad, who rules from magnificent cities like Samarkand and Bukhara. The caravan reaches the border city of Otrar, and this is where everything goes catastrophically wrong. The governor of Otrar, a man named Inalchuk, decides the merchants are spies. Or maybe he just wants their valuable goods. Whatever his reasoning, he has all 500 merchants executed and seizes their merchandise. When word reaches Genghis Khan, he does something uncharacteristically diplomatic. He sends envoys to the Shah demanding justice. Return the goods, punish the governor, and this can be resolved peacefully. The Shah's response seals his empire's fate. He has the head envoy executed and sends the other envoys back with their beards burned off, a profound insult in Mongol culture. Shah Muhammad has essentially declared that he doesn't consider Genghis Khan's representatives worthy of basic diplomatic respect, that the Mongol Empire is irrelevant, that there will be no consequences for killing Mongol merchants and insulting their Khan. He's miscalculated so badly that it's difficult to comprehend. He's just given Genghis Khan moral justification for total war, and Genghis is very good at total war. In 1219, Genghis Khan mobilizes an army estimated between 100,000 and 150,000 warriors. Not enormous by the standards of sedentary empires. But these are mounted archers who can cover 70 miles in a day, who can fight as coordinated units using signals and tactics refined over decades of constant warfare, who are led by generals chosen for competence rather than birth. The Khwarezmian Empire has a larger army, possibly 400,000 men, but they're scattered across a massive territory, defending multiple cities. And the Shah has a fundamental strategic problem. He doesn't know where the Mongols will attack. Genghis divides his force and attacks everywhere simultaneously. One army, led by his son Jochi, besieges Otrar, the city where the merchants were killed. The siege lasts months, and when the city finally falls, Governor Inalchuk is captured alive. Genghis has him executed by pouring molten silver into his eyes and ears, a symbolic punishment for greed and failure to see wisdom. Every soldier in Otrar is killed. The civilians are either enslaved or massacred, depending on their usefulness. The city is systematically demolished, irrigation systems destroyed, buildings torn down, fields salted. Otrar essentially ceases to exist. Meanwhile, Genghis himself leads the main army toward Bukhara, one of the greatest cultural and commercial centers of the Islamic world, a city of perhaps 300,000 people, with massive walls and supposedly impregnable defenses. The Mongols arrive in February 1220, and the garrison realizes they can't hold the city against a force that specializes in siege warfare. The Mongols have learned siege technology from Chinese engineers they've captured and conscripted. The garrison tries to break out and flee. They're slaughtered. The city opens its gates. Genghis rides into Bukhara's central square and delivers a speech to the terrified population assembled there. He tells them that he is the punishment of God, that their leaders have committed great sins, and that this destruction is divine judgment. It's psychological warfare of the highest order. He's not just a foreign invader. He's presenting himself as God's instrument of vengeance, making resistance seem not just futile, but blasphemous. The Mongols systematically loot the city. They take everything valuable: gold, silk, artwork, horses. Young men and women are separated out, with useful craftsmen and engineers spared and enslaved, beautiful women distributed among the warriors, and everyone else either killed or expelled. Then the Mongols set fire to the city. Bukhara burns for days. The magnificent library, one of the greatest in the Islamic world, is destroyed. Centuries of scholarship go up in smoke. Next is Samarkand, perhaps the most beautiful city in Central Asia, home to some of the most stunning Islamic architecture in the world. The siege begins in March 1220. The city has strong defenses, but the Mongols have elephants captured from previous conquests, siege engines built by Chinese engineers, and a complete willingness to use prisoners as human shields during assaults. After 5 days, the city surrenders. The same pattern repeats: loot everything, enslave useful people, kill the soldiers, destroy the infrastructure. The Shah flees ahead of the Mongol advance, running west toward Persia, with Mongol pursuit forces hunting him like prey. He dies on an island in the Caspian Sea in 1221, broken and defeated, watching his empire disintegrate. His son tries to continue resistance, but every time he assembles a force, the Mongols destroy it. By 1221, the Khwarezmian Empire, one of the wealthiest and most powerful states in the world just 3 years earlier, has effectively ceased to exist. The scale of destruction is difficult to overstate. Historians estimate that the Mongol invasion of the Khwarezmian Empire killed somewhere between 2 and 15 million people. The range is huge because record-keeping breaks down during apocalyptic violence. But even the low estimate represents a demographic catastrophe. Entire cities are erased. Irrigation systems that took centuries to build are destroyed, turning fertile land into desert. Trade networks collapse. The region doesn't fully recover for centuries. And Genghis has made his point. Cross me, and I won't just defeat you. I'll erase you from history. What makes Genghis Khan's armies truly terrifying isn't just their speed and skill. It's that they weaponize fear itself, with a sophistication that won't be matched until the age of mass media. Psychological warfare becomes as important as actual warfare, and the Mongols develop it into a science. The signature Mongol tactic is the feigned retreat. Mongol cavalry engages an enemy force, exchanges arrows, then suddenly breaks and runs. The enemy, thinking they're winning, charges after them in disorganized pursuit. Then the Mongols wheel around, reform their lines with perfect discipline, and massacre the scattered, exhausted pursuers who've been led into a killing zone. This tactic works again and again because the Mongol discipline is so perfect that what looks like a panicked rout is actually a coordinated maneuver executed at a gallop. Enemies can't tell the difference until it's too late. The Mongols also routinely exaggerate their numbers. They light extra campfires at night, have each soldier lead multiple spare horses to create dust clouds suggesting massive armies, spread rumors through captured merchants and travelers about impossibly large Mongol forces approaching. City defenders estimate they're facing 200,000 Mongols, when the actual number is maybe 40,000. Fear multiplies the effectiveness of the forces actually present, but the most brutal psychological weapon is selective massacre used as advertising. When a city surrenders immediately and cooperates, the Mongols are relatively merciful. They loot, they take tribute, but they don't engage in mass killing. But when a city resists, even briefly, the response is apocalyptic. Every person is killed except for useful craftsmen who are enslaved. The city is burned to the ground. And crucially, survivors are sometimes deliberately allowed to escape so they can spread the story. The next city in the Mongol path hears what happened. They hear about pyramids of skulls, about populations erased, about children killed, about irrigation systems destroyed to ensure nothing ever grows there again. And when Mongol ambassadors arrive offering terms, surrender now and live, resist and be annihilated, the choice becomes obvious. Cities surrender without fighting because the terror of Mongol reputation does the work of actual siege warfare. This means the Mongols can conquer faster and with fewer casualties than any previous nomadic invasion. They don't have to actually destroy every city they encounter. They destroy a few cities so thoroughly that the story of that destruction conquers the rest. It's terrorism in the most literal sense, using terror as a strategic tool to achieve military objectives without combat. The Mongols also develop extraordinary intelligence networks. They interrogate every prisoner, every traveler, every merchant. They want to know about roads, about defenses, about political tensions, about who's allied with whom. They have spies who travel years ahead of actual invasions, mapping terrain and reporting back. By the time a Mongol army arrives, they know the territory better than the people defending it, and they're masters of mobility warfare. Mongol armies can split into multiple columns, attack from unexpected directions, and reform before enemies can react. Each warrior has multiple horses and switches between them to maintain speed over long distances. They carry dried meat and mare's milk, requiring almost no supply train. They can cross terrain, deserts, mountains, rivers, that sedentary armies consider impassable, and they attack from directions that are supposedly impossible. The result is that fighting the Mongols feels like fighting ghosts. They appear where they shouldn't be. They retreat when you think you're winning, then destroy you when you pursue. They seem to be everywhere simultaneously, and the stories of what happens to people who resist make surrender feel like wisdom rather than cowardice. This is warfare evolved beyond just killing enemies. This is warfare that understands that the enemy's mind is as important a battlefield as any physical terrain. By the mid-12th century, Genghis Khan controls an empire stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the Caspian Sea. But here's what separates him from typical conquerors who just destroy and move on. He understands that conquest is only valuable if you can govern what you've conquered, extract resources, and maintain control without endless military occupation. So he builds systems. The YAM system is perhaps his most important administrative innovation. It's a postal relay network spanning the entire empire. Stations positioned about 25 miles apart, where mounted couriers can get fresh horses, food, and rest before continuing their journey. Messages and orders can travel from Mongolia to Persia in weeks rather than months. Imperial decrees reach distant provinces quickly. Intelligence flows back to the central command. It's the empire's nervous system, and it works so well that the concept influences postal systems for centuries, including aspects of the Pony Express. Trade flourishes under Mongol rule in ways it never did before. The Silk Road under previous empires was fragmented. Each kingdom charged tariffs. Bandits operated freely in border regions. Merchants needed separate negotiations in every territory. Under Mongol control, the entire route from China to the Middle East is unified under a single authority that guarantees safe passage. Bandits are hunted down and killed with extreme prejudice. Merchants pay taxes to the Mongol administration, but they're protected in return. The empire runs on trade revenue as much as on conquest plunder. Genghis implements a policy that's remarkably pragmatic for his era. Religious tolerance. He's personally spiritual. He believes in the sky god Tengri and consults shamans. But he doesn't care what religions his subjects practice, as long as they pay taxes and don't rebel. Muslims, Buddhists, Christians, Confucians, all are allowed to worship freely. This isn't enlightened pluralism. It's pragmatic governance. Religious persecution causes rebellion, and rebellion is expensive to suppress. Tolerance is cheaper. He's also pragmatic about expertise. When the Mongols conquer the Jin dynasty territories in northern China, they capture thousands of Chinese engineers, administrators, and scholars. Instead of killing them, Genghis puts them to work. Chinese engineers build siege weapons and artillery for Mongol armies. Chinese administrators help establish tax collection systems. Chinese scholars advise on governance. The Mongols are nomadic warriors, excellent at conquest, but less skilled at running sedentary agricultural civilizations. So they import the expertise they need. The empire Genghis builds is more diverse and interconnected than anything since the Roman Empire. Goods flow from China to Europe. Technologies transfer across continents. Gunpowder, printing, paper money, all spread more rapidly under Mongol rule than they would have in a fractured Asia. Languages mix. The Persian language adopts Mongol administrative terminology. Chinese art is influenced by Persian aesthetics. It's not a harmonious multicultural utopia. It's built on conquest and maintained by the threat of extreme violence. But it functions. and it makes Genghis unimaginably wealthy. The taxation system is brutal but efficient. Conquered territories pay tribute: gold, goods, soldiers, horses. Resistance means the army returns to destroy you. Cooperation means relative autonomy and protection from raids. Most subjects calculate that paying Mongol taxes is preferable to the chaos of constant tribal warfare or invasion by other empires. By 1226, Genghis controls approximately 2 million square miles, conquered during his lifetime alone, not counting territories that will be added by his successors. His army numbers perhaps 600,000 warriors at peak strength across all theaters. He has transformed from a tribal chieftain to the emperor of an administrative state that spans multiple civilizations. He's 74 years old, ancient by steppe warrior standards, and he's still campaigning. The empire he's built will outlast him and grow even larger under his descendants. But he won't see that expansion, because in 1227, during a campaign against the Tangut kingdom, Genghis Khan is going to die. And what happens next is almost as remarkable as his life. In August 1227, Genghis Khan is leading a campaign against the Tangut state in northwestern China. He's been at war, essentially, his entire adult life, more than 50 years of continuous military campaigns, and his body is finally breaking down. The exact cause of his death is disputed. Some sources say he fell from his horse during a hunt and never recovered from internal injuries. Others suggest illness, possibly plague. There are more exotic theories involving assassination or romantic misadventure. What we know for certain is that in August 1227, he dies. Before he dies, he gives orders that his death must be kept secret until the campaign is complete. The Tangut capital is still resisting, and he doesn't want the enemy to know they've outlasted him. So his closest commanders and family members hide the truth. They claim he's resting in his tent, recovering, making plans. The campaign continues. When the Tangut finally surrender, the secret is still held. The entire population of the capital is massacred according to Genghis's final orders. Total obliteration of the people who defied him to the end. Only after the destruction is complete does the Mongol army begin the journey back to Mongolia with Genghis's body. And this is where the story becomes legend. According to tradition, anyone who sees the funeral procession is killed immediately to keep the location of his burial secret. Entire villages along the route are reportedly slaughtered. When they reach the burial site, somewhere in the Mongolian steppe, possibly near the mountain Burkan Khaldun, where Genghis hid as a young fugitive, they bury him in an unmarked grave. Then they kill everyone involved in the burial except the highest-ranking commanders. Then they drive 1,000 horses over the burial site to destroy any trace of disturbed earth. Then they redirect a river to flow over the location, or they plant trees, or both. The accounts vary. The goal is complete concealment. No tomb, no monument, no site for enemies to desecrate or treasure hunters to loot. Genghis Khan simply vanishes into the earth of the land he came from. To this day, his tomb has never been found. Multiple expeditions have searched using everything from satellite imagery to ground-penetrating radar. They've identified hundreds of potential sites. They've found medieval Mongol graves, but never the tomb of Genghis Khan. It remains one of history's great unsolved mysteries, and possibly that's exactly what he wanted, to become a legend without a body, an idea without physical remains that could be diminished. His sons and grandsons continue the conquests. The empire keeps expanding for decades after his death. His grandson Batu Khan conquers Russia and reaches the gates of Vienna. His grandson Kublai Khan completes the conquest of China and establishes the Yuan dynasty. His grandson Hulagu sacks Baghdad in 1258, ending the Abbasid Caliphate and destroying perhaps the greatest library in the Islamic world. At its maximum extent under Kublai, the Mongol Empire controls approximately 9% of the Earth's land surface and roughly a quarter of humanity. Genghis Khan created the largest contiguous empire in human history, and he did it starting from absolutely nothing. The orphan who should have died became the man who conquered the world, and when he died, he made sure nobody could reduce him to bones in a box. He remains a ghost, which is somehow fitting for a man who fought wars using terror and reputation as much as arrows and swords. The Mongol Empire doesn't last forever. No empire does. It fragments after Kublai Khan's death in 1294, splitting into smaller khanates that eventually get absorbed or conquered by rising powers. But the aftershocks of what Genghis started reshape the world in ways that last much longer than the empire itself. First, the obvious. Genghis Khan changed the genetic map of Asia. Modern DNA studies estimate that approximately 1 in 200 men alive today, roughly 16 million people, carry Y chromosome markers suggesting descent from Genghis Khan or his close male relatives. This isn't proof of Genghis personally fathering thousands of children, but it does demonstrate that his lineage proliferated across Asia in ways that are still detectable 800 years later. It's evolution through conquest, the most successful conqueror's genes spreading proportionally to his success. Second, the Mongols killed so many people that they might have temporarily cooled the planet. Estimates suggest 40 million deaths during the Mongol conquests. Abandoned farmland reverted to forest, absorbing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Some studies suggest this caused a measurable dip in atmospheric CO2 levels. Basically, Genghis Khan's genocides were environmentally beneficial in the most horrible way possible. It's a reminder that human population and land use affect climate even in pre-industrial eras. Third, the unified Silk Road under Mongol protection facilitated the greatest exchange of ideas, technologies, and diseases in human history up to that point. Paper money spread from China westward. Gunpowder technology moved along Mongol trade routes, eventually reaching Europe and revolutionizing warfare. The compass, printing techniques, even certain foods moved along these routes. But so did the Black Death. Plague bacteria likely traveled along the same Mongol-protected trade routes that facilitated commerce. Mongol armies conducting sieges in Crimea catapulted plague-infected corpses over city walls as biological warfare. Traders fled those cities and brought the disease to Mediterranean ports, and from there it spread across Europe, killing a third to half the population. The Mongol Empire united the world so thoroughly that diseases could spread faster than ever before. The first truly transcontinental pandemic rode Mongol trade routes. Fourth, the Mongol invasions accelerated the collapse of the Islamic Golden Age. The sack of Baghdad in 1258 by Hulagu Khan destroyed libraries, massacred scholars, and ended the Abbasid Caliphate that had been the intellectual and cultural center of the Islamic world for 5 centuries. Irrigation systems across Persia and Central Asia were destroyed and never fully rebuilt, causing long-term agricultural decline. The Islamic world's center of gravity shifted permanently, and it never fully recovered the scientific and philosophical dynamism it had during its peak. Fifth, the Mongol conquests indirectly helped create the conditions for European expansion. With overland trade routes disrupted and dangerous even after Mongol decline, European kingdoms sought ocean routes to Asia. Portuguese and Spanish exploration in the 15th and 16th centuries, the voyages that led to colonization of the Americas, were partly driven by the need to bypass the Mongol-disrupted land routes. Columbus was literally trying to reach Asia by sailing west because going east overland had become too difficult. Sixth, the Mongols proved that nomadic warriors using mobility, coordination, and psychological warfare could destroy settled agricultural civilizations that massively outnumbered them. This lesson was studied by military theorists for centuries. Elements of Mongol tactics, mobility, decentralized command, use of terror, intelligence gathering show up in everything from Nazi blitzkrieg to modern special operations doctrine. The Mongols created a template for asymmetric warfare that works when your enemy is richer and more numerous, but slower and less adaptable. Today, Genghis Khan is a divisive figure. In Mongolia, he is a national hero. His face is on currency. There are statues of him in the capital. He represents Mongolian pride and power. In countries he invaded, the legacy is darker. In Russia, Iran, Iraq, China, he's remembered as a destroyer, a killer on a scale almost incomprehensible. Approximately 40 million people died in wars he started. That's roughly the population of Spain or Argentina wiped out. The percentage of humanity killed in Mongol conquests might have been as high as 11% of the global population. But here's what makes his story more than just a tale of mass murder. Genghis Khan proved that the world as currently organized is never permanent. He took a system, the Mongolian tribal structure, that seemed eternal and shattered it based on merit and loyalty instead of blood and tradition. Then he took that new system and used it to shatter empires that seemed invincible. He demonstrated that one person with absolute clarity about what they want, with the willingness to be more ruthless than their enemies, and with the tactical and strategic genius to turn disadvantages into advantages, can reshape the world. He started with nothing. No army, no tribe, no inheritance except survival skills and rage. He ended with an empire larger than any that came before, and the world that emerged from the rubble of his conquests was fundamentally different from the world before he existed. That's not justification for the horror he caused. It's just acknowledgement that individual human beings, under specific circumstances, can redirect the course of history through pure force of will and tactical brilliance. The boy without a tribe became the man who conquered the world, and 800 years later, we're still living in the world his victories created. Genghis Khan's story is brutal, brilliant, and impossible to reduce to simple moral judgments. He was a genocidal conqueror who killed millions. He was also a tactical genius who built the largest land empire in history from nothing. He destroyed civilizations and created systems of trade and governance that connected the world in unprecedented ways. He was a product of a brutal time who made that time even more brutal, and whose actions still echo in genetics, in borders, in the technologies and diseases that spread along the routes his empire protected. If there's a lesson in Genghis Khan's life, it's that systems aren't permanent, that talent and ruthlessness can overcome inherited privilege, and that the world is always more changeable than it appears. The empires that seemed invincible fell, The tribal system that seemed eternal was shattered, and the boy who should have died in childhood instead rewrote the map. If this kind of historical deep dive, the kind that examines not just what happened, but why it mattered, and how it connects to everything that came after, is valuable to you, subscribing helps me keep making them. There are more stories like this, more moments where individual human decisions redirected civilization, more patterns worth understanding if you want to grasp how power actually works. Thank you for being here. Thank you for spending 40 minutes learning about one of history's most transformative and terrifying figures. Remember the 40 million who died in the wars he started, the empires he destroyed, and the world he created in the ruins. Because love him or hate him, Genghis Khan changed everything. See you in the next one.